And now we hand over to William Petrie and the panel who are going to discuss Scotland 2021.
Thank you, Camilla. My favorite name for this panel is Timelines for Tourism, because my sentiment is that we all want to know when we can start doing what it is that we're going to be able to do. It's of immense concern and interest to the community, and of course to Scotland. Panelists that we're having today are going to provide us with a quick insight into their area of tourism, followed by what are known for the mechanisms and timings of tourism activities now and going forward. These panelists are Lord Jamie Semple, who's currently engaged in promoting ancestral tourism and also hosts his own historical tours in Scotland. Over the past 15 years, he has been an active member of the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. Kristen Bridier, who is the Executive Director for the National Trust for Scotland Foundation, USA. Professor Donna Heddle is back, and she is Director of the University of Highlands and Islands Institute for Northern Studies. Her research interests are Scottish and Northern Isles cultural history, Renaissance language and literature, and cultural tourism. Professor David Worthington is an historian of Scottish and of course wider British and Irish connections with Central Europe. He chairs the UHI HLH subgroup for the Everness Castle project, which he'll speak more to us about. Gordon Bogg is the marketing and communications business partner for Glasgow Life, where he has delivered culture and sport, mainly culture, on behalf of Glasgow City Council for almost 14 years. And also giving us an insight on what's been happening as far as the experience with the Fringe and with the tattoo. We're going to bring Jamie Mcgeehan on, and he's our resident technical genius. He's also a Scottish singer, songwriter, and poet who was born in Falkirk and grew up in Ayr. You're hearing him often as that narrator voice as he manages the ongoing conference in the background. So with that, I'm going to ask Jamie Semple to continue with his presentation.
Hi there. I really hope that I've tuned in properly. First of all, good morning to you all from what today was a remarkably sunny Scotland, following one day of torrential rain and the prior day of substantial snow. Yes, so I've been given the rather, what I would call challenge of trying to predict what the tourist picture is going to look like in 2021. And it does remind me of an incident that happened 1,000 years ago in my youth, of an exam that I had to sit along with some of my friends. And there was a question, and the question, I'll never forget it, which was, what was the future of the British coal industry? And one of my friends wrote, black, full stop. And his tutor called him in afterwards and pointed out to him that he wasn't going to give him any points for the answer, but he did want to tell him that it had been remarkably accurate and very precise. And the reason he had no points was that he hadn't substantiated his claim. Well, that puts me into this predicament, which is there is no way I can be precise or accurate about what is going to happen next year. What I can say is that it's going to be very uncertain. I have had the advantage of having had discussions with some close friends of mine in the last week, primarily Scottish Clans and Castles, who I'm sure some of you will know, and Rabbie's Tours. And they have spent most of this year rebooking tours that were meant to happen this year, and by and large have rebooked them all into next year. And that applies for my small amount of tours as well. So as things sit, there are definitely going to be tours happening next year. But the question really is that too early? And are we actually going to find ourselves having to rebook them into 2022? One thing is for certain, I go back to the question of the future of the British coal industry. I do have some facts on next year. One of them is that the virus is not going away, and neither is it going on holiday. Secondly, our vaccination program will be underway, but that's all. It will be by no stretch of the imagination complete. In fact, an article in yesterday's Telegraph pointed out that they felt that the younger age group in Scotland would be lucky to have the vaccination much before the middle of next year. And that leads to the third and final point, because of the two above, that contagion will still be a reality. So that obviously implies that restrictions may still be in place. Now, previous contributions have clearly addressed issues like international travel, but travel followed by accommodation and venues are all susceptible to falling under restrictions, whether international or domestic. It's important to understand that in Scotland, we will have a track and trace, or should we say, we do have a track and trace system, and this will be in place. I think just small examples will highlight the predicament that we find ourselves in. You could be in your hotel, everything could be going absolutely swimmingly, and a virus. What will be the result? Well, it's quite likely, judged on previous examples, that the hotel could be put into quarantine, including all the guests. So I think this is worth taking into consideration. Interestingly enough, in speaking, as I mentioned earlier, to Ravi's tours, they have already focused extensively on minimalizing risk. This to them is the key to the success of reintroducing tourism to Scotland. What do we mean by minimalizing risk? Well, the critical issue that they've got is about health and safety. They run a fleet, a substantial fleet of 16-seater buses, and their intention is that at the moment, no more than 8 passengers will travel in each bus. This will obviously give substantial space to the individual traveler. The driver guide will be responsible for ensuring that people do have face masks and that there are sufficient amounts of sanitation for the hands. There is another dynamic, though, that needs to be taken into consideration. This is going back to the issue I mentioned of, well, what happens if somebody is detected with the virus? In the case, let's say, of a venue or a location. And in order to ensure maximum protection in these environments, it's quite likely that they're going to constrict numbers of people who go around a property at any one time. Small groups will then require, because there are going to be so many of them, to be on a time slot. That, as you can imagine, will put pressure on driver guides in terms of getting, let's say they've got 6 venues that they're going to have to cover, in ensuring that they get from venue A to B on time. But let's not forget, the emphasis here is very much on minimalizing risk, and the emphasis is on health and safety. All of this is about regaining confidence. Ultimately, we are very keen that all of those specifically overseas that have doubts or concerns about traveling, travel on the clear understanding that we are making maximum efforts to ensure that everybody is going to be safe. This year, as Lord Thurso mentioned, has been a write-off. Scottish tourism cannot afford another year as a write-off. So yes, we are really pulling every iron out of the fire to ensure that people who do travel are going to travel with minimal risk. So all I will say is that if you are aware of friends or you have colleagues that you are aware who are, let's say, trying to do their own thing online, which, as we know, is very much a popular trend. It's easy to go online, book Airbnb, book tours, book whatever. But I will just bring up raise a question mark on this, what I would call style of travel. It doesn't allow you to avoid risk. One of the advantages of using agents and tour operators directly is that they undertake the risk on your behalf. And I think on behalf of my fellow colleagues, this is the important point that I would like to make. So on behalf of all of us, yeah, we want to see you next year. Realistically, probably mid to late, I would say late summer through the autumn is the best time to travel. And the one thing I can guarantee is we will have some days of sunshine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And certainly one of the things that I'm getting from people talking during the conferences, it's not that it's going to be all right. It's actually going to end up being better because we'll figure out other things. And I'm sure that further to that, we can hear from Kristen Bridier.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Great. I'm so glad to be with you today, and thank you so much for including me. I thought I would start my talk this morning with this beautiful image of Culloden battlefield under rainbow skies. Let's call this my vision board for 2021. The truth is 2021 is likely to bring continued disruption at the National Trust for Scotland. But I'm delighted to speak with you this morning about how we have strengthened cultural connections between Scotland and the US this year and our plans to continue doing so in 2021 and beyond. To begin with a bit of context, the National Trust for Scotland is the largest conservation charity in Scotland. The Trust cares for more than 100 historically and culturally significant properties from St. Kilda to St. Abbs Head. Its holdings include archaeological sites, islands, fine art, rare plant collections, and are home to endangered Scottish wildlife and more than 1 million seabirds. Of the Trust's 88 historic properties that are open to the public in a normal year, only 5 produce income. The rest operate at a deficit. The Trust is a private charity and until this year received no government funding. And about 7.5% of the Trust's nearly 4 million visitors annually are from North America. In the US, NTS USA, which I direct, supports the Trust's work. We're an independent 501c3 nonprofit with a mission of raising funds and visibility for the Trust's most urgent conservation priorities. We're based in Boston and have members in all 50 states. And we really do feel that we serve as ambassadors for the Trust's work and for Scottish cultural heritage. And we were so excited to start 2020, which marks our American Foundation's 20th anniversary, by partnering with the Scottish Government Affairs Office in Washington to bring the Gregg violin to the US. This violin, a beautiful instrument, was once owned by Robert Burns's dancing master and likely played by the poet himself, and accompanied by Trust curator David Hopes and fiddler Alistair McCullough. The historic instrument traveled to 5 cities over 18 days in January, where it was played for 1,700 people in person and thousands more via podcast and radio and television. It was such an incredible opportunity to bring a treasured piece of Scottish heritage to the US and really to transport Americans across space and time to 18th century airshare. And we were excited to build on its success. But unfortunately, 2020 had different plans for us all. The pandemic hit right as the busy tourist season in Scotland was beginning. And the Trust, which over the past 5 years had shifted its business model to rely more on earned income from cafes and group tours rather than on philanthropy, suddenly found itself projected to lose $35 million. Drastic measures were considered, including widespread layoffs and even selling some Trust properties. And these losses, these projected losses, would hit rural communities where the trust is a major employer and also a community resource the hardest. So in May 2021, we launched an international emergency appeal called Save Our Scotland. And to date, I'm delighted to share that we've raised $4.5 million, including $500,000 from American donors, some of whom are with us today, and from NTS USA reserves. In addition, the Scottish government contributed $5 million to save more than 200 jobs at the trust. And again, this is the first government funding the trust has ever received, and we're extremely grateful. And as a result, even though visitors couldn't come in all year, the trust's ongoing work, preventative maintenance on historic buildings, caring for livestock and landscapes could continue. And as regulations allowed, we've opened as many trust properties as possible. In November, there were about 40 trust properties accessible to the public, but as has been mentioned, with tightened guidelines, once again, that number is lessening by the day. So what's ahead for 2021 and how can we in North America help? We know that the trust has an important role to play in our global recovery from this pandemic. Trust properties like Blencoe, which you can just drive through. You don't have to visit at stop at the visitor center. So again, it's not really an income producing property, but these countryside landscapes allow Scots to get outdoors, to improve their mental and physical health in a safe way. And here in the US, this year has reinforced our country's shared values and helped clarify what's important to us in the Scottish diaspora to preserve. It's not all good news. According to the Association of Scottish Visitor Attractions, 1 in 3 Scottish attractions did not reopen in 2020 following lockdown. There's a 76% decline in visitor numbers to visitor attractions in Scotland compared to last year. And only 23% of attractions are able to operate at an economically sustainable model when reopened. So we're expecting continued disruption in 2021. The factors the trust will use to determine when and how historic properties will reopen include compliance, that is whether we're allowed by the government to reopen or not, capacity, which is reduced, of course, by social distancing, which means that smaller properties like Craigivar Castle here cannot easily be reopened. And as a result, we're really beefing up outdoor interpretation at properties. And as was just previously mentioned, we've turned to a timed ticketing system so that visitor access is limited. And then finally, demand or consumer confidence. And in fact, the Association of Scottish Visitor Attractions is recommending that the Scottish market focus on regional European visitors in 2021 and not fully looking to re-engage with the North American market until the second half of 2021 or 2022, as we've heard. Even though we can't travel to Scotland in the first half of 2021, there are important ways that we can reinforce our shared heritage. And April 2021 actually marks the 275th anniversary of one of the most critical moments in Scottish history, the Battle of Culloden, in which the final Jacobite rising came to a brutal head. Jacobite supporters who wanted to put Prince Charlie on the throne prepared on April 16th for one last battle against the Duke of Cumberland's government troops. It was the last pitched battle on British soil, and in less than 1 hour, 1,600 men were slain, 1,500 of them Jacobites. In addition to the historical importance of this site, the 5-star rated battlefield and visitor center has a critical impact on the local economy. The site employs 70 people and brings in 300,000 visitors, £7 million annually. 75% of the food served in the cafe was grown within 40 miles of the visitor center, and the gift shop also features wares from local small businesses. So to commemorate the 275th anniversary of the battle, we can't be together in person, but the Trust is planning to hold a digital conference in April to share the latest research to an international audience. Working with military historian Christopher Duffy, the Trust is studying the impact of geography on the battle itself. So how this boggy moorland location might have contributed to the Jacobite defeat. We've actually just completed a LiDAR study, which involves laser beams being sent down from an airplane. And the Trust archaeologist is interpreting the results. And this new understanding of the physical landscape, coupled with historical accounts, will give us the best picture we've ever had of the battle at Culloden. Ultimately, the scan will be used to create a new 3D model of the site that will serve as a centerpiece of the visitor center and can be overlaid with historic maps and locations of various troops. Now, this guy is not a laser beam, but this is actually another cutting edge method of battlefield land management that the conference is going to highlight. If nature were allowed to take its course, the battlefield at Culloden would look very different. And the Trust works hard to control the relentless growth of self-seeding trees on the site and gets help from grazing animals, Shetland coos, Highland coos, and goats to do so, which allows us to keep machinery and chemicals at a minimum. American donors have supported the purchase and maintenance of livestock over the past 3 years, and it's just one small way that we in North America are making a real concrete difference to the interpretation of this site where many of our ancestors died. Of course, we had hoped to have a massive clan reunion as part of the anniversary celebration. And just building on what Joni Smith and John Belisai have been saying, I think we've really been able to see how we can connect digitally. And I hope that we're able to connect clans virtually in April, even though we can't be there in person. Earlier this year, in preparation for the 275th anniversary, and as the Trust moves towards its own centennial in 2031, we released Culloden 300, a report that outlines a new role for the Trust: advocacy. The Trust has traditionally stayed apart from politics and public advocacy, but with increasing threats of development and climate change to many irreplaceable properties, including Culloden, we knew this was a step we needed to take. And so the Culloden 300 report summarizes findings of a 6-month survey carried out in 2019. Results confirmed that people connect in a rare and powerful way with Culloden battlefield. It's the battlefield itself and the views that surround the site that give it a sense of place. And one survey participant said it is by far the most emotionally significant place anywhere in Scotland. But the Trust only owns 1/3 of the actual battleground site. It sits within a cultural landscape that's owned by many different organizations and private individuals. And over the last 10 years, agricultural land in Inverness has come under increasing pressure from development, like a 16-house development at View Hill that is now visible from Culloden battlefield. The Trust believes that Culloden Moor is at the heart of Scotland's cultural and spiritual identity as a nation, and if we stand back and allow its demise through inappropriate development, future generations will never understand or forgive us. And so this Culloden 300 report outlines a blueprint for agencies, communities, and the government to proactively work together on a future-focused management plan to conserve the cultural landscape at Culloden. And this effort lays at the heart of all 275th anniversary activity. And finally, as important as all of this work is, of course, what we really want to do is to go back to Scotland. And I'm thrilled to share that NTS USA, after rescheduling it twice, is going forward with a week-long trip in September 2021 that will focus on heritage gardens of Perthshire and Fife, including the Percy Kane designed garden at Falkland Palace, seen here. Falkland is a Renaissance palace that after World War II, 20th century garden designer Percy Kane came in and redid the Victory Gardens into this very beautiful, recently restored landscape. The magnificent gardens of central and eastern Scotland represent centuries of Scottish history and culture, from private gardens that have been held in individual families for 300 years, to significant designed landscapes and plant collections held on behalf of future generations by the Trust, and more recent designs that have resulted in new sites of extraordinary beauty. And in this tour, we'll be visiting Kelly Castle, Falkland Palace, Balpasky, Balcarres, Blair Castle, the Hermitage seen here, and Cambo House, and I cannot wait to be there in September 2021. Thank you again for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the trust plan for the upcoming year.
Thank you very much, Kristen. And it's great to hear that the plans are ongoing, and we're going to get there. I'd like to move now to Professor Donna Heddle, who's going to give us an update on, more of an update on what we can expect going forward. Go ahead, Donna, please.
Thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. It's lovely to speak to you again. And for those of you who were with us yesterday, yes, it's again, but I am now wearing my other hat as Head of Tourism at the University of the Highlands and Islands. As we've heard from earlier speakers, the situation for all tourism businesses in the Highlands and Islands is indeed devastating, and UHI is to support them. One of the initiatives that we've taken forward is the Adopt a Business scheme, which partners academics with businesses who are requiring help, perhaps in reprofiling, marketing strategy, making better use, just as Kirsten was saying about using outside areas for interpretation activities and so on, things like that. So we've been very much to the fore in trying to help in a very practical way. But fortunately, Highlands and Islands, with the guidance and advice set by the Scottish Government and Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group, that's STERG, snappy acronym there, in line with its Reset and Recovery Action Plan and within the frameworks set by international organisations and institutions such as the UN World Health Organization and the UN World Tourism Organization, we can see a future for Highlands and Islands tourism. It is, of course, perfectly clear that social distancing, at the very least, is likely to be applied for the foreseeable future. And Visit Scotland has published its interpretation of the future evolution of the recovery of tourism, along with analysis of the global markets and the actions of Scotland's competitive set. And steady as she goes seems to be the approach. The key message behind a cautious, a limited and carefully managed future. Now, having said that, and doom and gloom is indeed with us, but there are many reports and commentaries emerging about the future of tourism over the next 10 years. And it's clear from these sources that there does appear to be an emerging consensus around a number of core themes and trends that will prevail. So there are, in fact, opportunities in this very difficult situation in which we find ourselves to step back for a moment, to look again closely at what we consider tourism to be and what kind of tourism we actually want for the Highlands and Islands. Of course, there will be a need to transition to venturing back into the wider world at a new, slower pace. And we have to take into account that it's likely that tourists might not want to stray so far from home at first, minimising the amount of time that we spend in airports or in planes. And there will be an increased use of the private car and less large group travel. When we could travel freely again, whether that's weeks or months away or even years away, many airlines will still be grounded indefinitely, if not bankrupted. Travel insurance policies could be more limited. Wanting to know our escapes are underwritten and won't fall through is, of course, a given for any sensible traveller. Will likely require health certificates and need to jump through more hoops for visas if our desired destination even allows visitors. Keeping things safe and simple with staycations shows a willingness to explore closer to home. Climate change and growing concerns about unpredictable situations in overseas destinations aligned to issues associated with Brexit, which is something that we're just going through at the moment, have already been fueling a demand for much more domestic tourism. As we were hearing earlier from Lord Thurso, it looks like the markets are going to open in a domestic front first, then across UK, and then more internationally. And we'll also have ongoing concerns which will prevail about tourists travelling from locally hit by COVID-19 to rural destinations such as the Highlands and Islands, meaning that destinations and businesses will apply stringent controls and checks on guests as well. And in fact, it's been research has indicated that recovery of air travel would take 3 to 5 years to return to any level of mass engagement. So the importance of rail and sea ferries will increase, and we're quite well furnished in Scotland with trains and ferries. They'll still be going. We'll see better planned, more cautious and considered travel by potential markets, both long-term visitors and people who are just here briefly, consumers will be taking more time and will be expecting more information about the places that they want to visit, and they will expect all tourism businesses to be up to date and comply with all relevant health-based conditions and rules. Space and place, however, will be a premium. And here again, this is where we have a slight advantage in the Highlands and Islands, because we've got plenty of space and place for people to occupy. As you know, the social distancing will be continued, which means that tourists will be seeking out low density, smaller capacity and more rural or less crowded environments like Scotland, particularly where we are in the Highlands and Islands. If anybody wasn't with us yesterday, yes, I'm coming to you from the Orkney Islands, 59 North, hello. This means that all tourist facilities and attractions will have to operate on lower numbers, reduced capacities, and a business model configured on this new paradigm. Now, the unknown aspect of this for the Scottish tourist industry, of course, is how much will tourists be prepared to pay a price that reflects the value of the experience. All is not lost, of course. Scotland's already doing this with some of the attractions. You book slots online to enter them, so on and so forth. There's a carefully measured way of accessing it. And some of the work we've done with the Adopt a Business scheme is to develop different ways of assessing tourist attraction and using the outside and so on better, as I was briefly mentioning earlier. Now, another interesting thing that's happened is that the anticipation and the expectation of the tourism and travel experience, especially leisure tourism, will increase. This is now being referred to by tourism experts as deferred gratification, which is quite an interesting term. And research at the Centre for Sustainability, Tourism and Transport in Bridier University in the Netherlands has shown that we derive most of our happiness from the expectation of an incoming escapade. I would have to say, at any holiday I've taken with my younger sister, I'm quite sure she's derived more entertainment out of packing and repacking and the anticipation of actually going. So I think there's a much merit in this. So this is an interesting thing, because in the Highlands and Islands in Scotland, what we can offer are things like, to fill in the time before you can come and join us again, are things like virtual tours. Many attractions that we have in Scotland have virtual tours that you can take. Many museums have now put a lot of their collections online, so you can visit them and get to know them before you come to see them in person. You can also undertake bespoke courses, such as we have at the University of the Highlands and Islands, in different aspects of Scottish history, culture, language, and so on, which is available to you from your own computer. So you can enjoy that deferred gratification before you actually come back to join us, which we hope will be towards the end of 2021. So after a period of lockdown then, and higher levels of anticipation, then the demand on the destination or the attraction to deliver will be more important than ever. We know that understanding the new needs, expectations, and behavioural patterns of visitors will be more important than ever before, because we will have less of them. Tourists will be more judicious about how they spend their money. They'll be hoping that their expenditure will help support local supply chains and assist communities heal after this hiatus. Personal and family wellness and well-being will become increasingly important. In fact, pre-COVID-19, travel for these purposes were already showing strong growth, with this becoming a major driver of tourism in the future in Scotland. And again, the Highlands and Islands is well placed for that. Scotland is seen as a safe place to travel to. It's seen as a place with clean air, good food, open spaces, and to renew yourself. You know, when people come to Scotland, Scotland's not just a geographical location, temporal one too. You don't come to Scotland to lie on a beach unless there's something far wrong with you. An occasional removal of a cardigan now and again might be the thing. But what you do come for is a sense of renewal and relaxation and reaffirmation of your identity. And we still have that in Spain. This will become even more to the fore in developing tourism strands, we researchers feel very strongly. And of course, this will have implications for all sectors within the industry, with all businesses needing to address the physical, psychological, and social aspects of a visitor's health and well-being. The search for authentic, highly localized and customized experience, often based on a simple, uncomplicated, co-created approach involving both the host community and the tourist, will mean that there will be increased demand for local products and local materials, which of course we have in the Highlands and Islands in spades. So tourists will be changing how they articulate with their destination. They'll be wanting to understand and check the growing provenance of everything they consume and encounter in a destination. They will expect similar reassurances from the host, as the host will seek from the visitor. And there's clear evidence, of course, and colleagues have mentioned it earlier, to demonstrate the health benefits, both physical and psychological, of exercise in outdoor high-quality environments. All aspects and forms of wellness and well-being tourism will flourish. And it'll provide opportunities to get closer to the environment in ways that are inspired by the genius loci, vernacular designs and traditional crafts, respecting the very best practice in environmental standards and respecting local physical and natural characteristics. So following the advice of the Scottish Government, as well as key partners like Visit Scotland, the idea is to ensure that when the time comes to lift lockdown measures, partially or otherwise, it's done in a controlled and safe way to ensure that we help to stop the spread of the virus. And looking beyond the initial relaxation of restrictions, we can also see an opportunity to reset tourism and look at how we can take it forward in a responsible manner. Local management is going to be just as important as local promotion. Central to that will be communities. They are the people that are both affected by and benefit from tourism. It's this balance that we have to get right to ensure this experience is positive for everyone. And it's a chance now for us to reflect on that. This may be an enforced hiatus, but we can turn it to advantage. So looking to the future, just to finish up, everything we took for granted in our tourism experiences, whether it's a weekend away, a day trip, or a 2-week holiday, will become more special to us. And where is more special to go than Scotland, of course? Connecting with the local culture and storytelling, really getting to understand the heart of a destination, spending more time discovering, less time passing through, viewing our choice of restaurant, destination, and experience through the camera of a smartphone. Future tourism experiences will become more about human connection. While we miss our freedom to explore, discover, learn, and have fun just now, I have a feeling that our need to slow down and be more mindful will allow us to appreciate quality tourism experiences through people and place in a much deeper and more meaningful, memorable way. And Scotland is well placed to be a great venue for this, with our wide open spaces, our landscape, our people, our quality food, and everything that we have. And so, although I can only give you a virtual hug today from Scotland, just be reassured that Scotland's welcome to you in 2021 is just as warm as ever. Falcha hula dunya. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Donna. And believe me, I think we all want to reciprocate the virtual hug, and looking forward to when we can end up being there in person. We're running tight on time, so I'm going to quickly jump to David Worthington and let him run with his presentation.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about something that we heard about a bit earlier in the video, the spirit of the Highlands project, which connects with Everness Castle and what is going on there. So if I'll just call up my presentation. Okay. Could you let me know if you can't see the screen? I'm just going to go to the slideshow.
Yeah, we're good.
That's great. So yeah, I work at the University of the Highlands and Islands, as does Professor Heddle, the same institution. And I live about 35 miles north of Inverness, which is the capital city in the Highland administrative region. I'm going to tell you a bit about this project. I wanted to start with a couple of photos. One thing I've found in the last 9 months of working online and being at home is it was wonderful to see a physical manifestation of tourism and heritage. And this is one I've seen, and I'm really holding close to it because it really uplifted me. I don't know if any of you recognize this site. It's Everness Castle, which occupies a prominent spot in Inverness on Castle Hill, but a slightly undervalued spot, perhaps, one that people haven't quite used or made the most of as much as they might have in the past. Anyway, these hoardings went up in September, and I was lucky enough to be a text advisor along with a colleague of mine at our Gaelic College on Skye. And it was lovely to see it, and it was great to see mention of our university and the role it's played in showing how it can pioneer new ways of living, working and learning in the region. So I'm just going to tell you very briefly about some key areas of our collaboration with the Everness Castle project, and I'll get to the spirit of the Highlands in just a minute. The Everness Castle project is the biggest single heritage development in the region for over a century. It's based around the City Region deal, which brings around £315 million, I think, to the region. key for us, in terms of myself and many of the academics involved in this, is the castle project element, and that's about £15 million of investment. What this is going to do is grow the Castle Hill area of Inverness. So the castle site was, until recently, the seat of court, and the buildings have been used for those purposes, but they are now in the possession of Highland Council, and the developments are proceeding apace, and you saw the hoardings there. One of the key goals of this in the long term is the creation of a visitor attraction, including a museum and gallery, by about 2024 to 25. So in my role, I'm head of our Centre for History. We're based in a place called Donna. We have, for the last 5 years or so, been working with a body called High Life Highland, who are an umbrella group who look after museums, libraries, and archives in the region. And they're really to the fore in the Castle project. So along with Professor Heddle and others, I sit on a subgroup and decided to really move on that in 2018. I felt it was really important that we as a university committed to having a transformative impact on the communities of our region, really engaged with this project. I'm delighted to say that's happening. And we've had student placements. You saw that video, I think, a few minutes ago, and that featured one of our BA Honours Contemporary Filmmaking in the Highlands and Islands students, Sarah Chonka in Allness, and Julie Fowlis, who you heard narrating that, a wonderful musician. She's a graduate of our university, so it's really great that Julie supports what we do, and that's been one area where we collaborated on that video. BA Honours Art and Contemporary Practices also shows how our creative and cultural industry students are becoming engaged in this. We've had 1 student placement in the spring and 2 further online placements with the creative director of the Castle project. So these are already up and running, and I'm proud to see how our university is engaging with the project. So I'm going to be slightly self-centered just for a couple of minutes and talk about how history can inform this. I have to say that I've seen examples before of academics parachuting into local community projects and not doing it well. This project is a good test for us, I hope, of our commitment to doing this effectively. And we're doing it from a base, as I say, in Dornoch, which is not in Inverness itself, but this castle project and the visitor attraction is not just for Inverness. Of course, it's in Inverness, but it is there for the entire region. And that's why we feel we are potentially to the fore. And the approach I'm taking to this, and that we are taking to this, is one that I would label public history, which is the academic background in terms of how we as academics can use our expertise to engage and inform and also learn from other people learning and using the past in tourism. You can't get far from history in the Highlands and Islands. It's there, it's in the forefront. And the approach that we are taking is very much about involving people and communities in the creation of this history. And as I say, not assuming that we are always impacting on these communities, they're impacting on us too. And I feel that's absolutely vital in terms of defining things as we go ahead. So I've been planning and plotting a few ideas, and what I would like to see over the next 3 to 4 years, paralleling what's going on in the castle, would be what I've called a Highland Forum for Public History, which would bring in all sorts of people engaged in the past, in the region, all sorts of people with different memories, with different approaches to tackling that and to considering that and how we present the past, and make that really accessible and something exciting for people to get to. I won't go on for too long about these because I know that time is short, but they're just a few of the goals that we have. We want to really lead on this and provide something of a beacon in the region in terms of how this approach to the past is put forward. We want to compare with other regions. We want to engage in knowledge exchange, collaborate within and beyond the university. We also need to publish. We're academics, that's what we do. We'd love to see more research into the Castle project and similar types of ventures with students involving this kind of co-production, actually helping museums, helping tourism providers in terms of what they do. We as historians can do that. We can be inspiring in that sense. We teach in the field of public history. We invite people from the tourism area, people from heritage groups, museums. They come into our classes. At UHI, I think you've probably already heard, we didn't find the transition in the lockdown period a massive problem in terms of our systems because they were already in place. We use a lot of online approaches anyway. Student placements would be something more we wish to do, and also a lot more by way of public events. We've had great experience of working with the museums, libraries and archives of our region, displaying archival materials, having book launches, having our staff talk and engage with the public about what they're doing. So the spirit of the Highlands then, just to get to that before I finish up, absolutely vital this to the whole castle project. And this is where I think it relates to 2020 and 21, because this autumn, the castle project launched this story gathering process. And this is inviting people with anybody with any kind of experience and love of the region or involvement in the region to submit, I think, a 200-word story via this website. You can also submit images. And the castle team, the castle project team are gathering these and collating these, thankfully inspired by this excellent video narrated by Julie, our graduate. And just to finish off then, like Professor Heddle, I'm a member of the Professoriate, which is maybe quite, I don't know if it's a pompous term, but it's a body of professors in UHI. And we're busy people, but I think we all feel that we need to work with our communities and with our heritage providers in terms of presenting that past in a really positive way for local communities and for tourists alike. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, David. David, I did put the link up for the for panelists and for attendees if they want to copy it for Spirit of the Highlands, and looking forward to them visiting. We are short on time, so I'm going to jump quickly to Gordon, who is going to provide us with some additional information. Go ahead, Gordon.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. It's the first time I've been fortunate enough to have been part of the Scottish North American Community Conference, so I'm very grateful for the invitation. I spent some time attending yesterday and found the sessions fascinating, so I hope I can manage to match the quality of some of the speakers that I enjoyed yesterday. David was referencing an organisation called the High Life a few minutes ago, and what I wanted to say was that I work for Glasgow Life, which does a very similar job in the city of Glasgow to them. It's a charity which delivers culture and sport on behalf of the city of Glasgow. I've worked there for almost all of its existence, so very nearly 14 years. Glasgow Life also delivers many of the best known attractions, events and culture and sports facilities in the city. You can see some of the examples there on the slide, and many of you, I hope, are already familiar with Celtic Connections, more of which I'll tell you about shortly, and the World Pipe Band Championships. They're among the many components which make Glasgow a UNESCO City of Music. Glasgow Life's also the charity which is responsible for Glasgow museums, probably most notably Kelvingrove Art Gallery and Museum, but also the Borough Collection, which is being refurbished at the moment, and Riverside Museum, which is Scotland's Transport and Travel Museum. I thought it might be helpful to describe the importance of cultural, artistic and museums infrastructure in Glasgow. According to recent research by cultural economist John Myerscough, attendance in the city in 2017-2018 was 15.155 million people. It gives you a real sense of the scale of what's been lost as a result of COVID-19. That in itself represents growth of about 25% since 2008-2009. Figures vary across the activities that encompasses, but the growth has been particularly strong across popular music, historic buildings, and contemporary visual arts. Glasgow in itself, during 2017-2018, hosted 22 festivals in 190 days or over 190 days. That includes specialist off-season events. They draw almost 1 million people that year. 4,000 live performances approximately in the city annually. Glasgow's the biggest centre for stage productions outside London. There were 71 of those in 2015-2016. Culture and creative industries. has increased by about 24% since between 2009 and 2018. Museums had about 4.475 accredited museums visits in 2018. It's a hugely important part of the city economy. It's a hugely important sector for us. So it gives you a bit of an understanding of the impact that COVID-19 and the cessation of almost all of this activity for long periods of time has had. And the difficulty now is in accurately predicting what life is going to be like in 3 to 6 months' time. We're currently moving between protection levels at sometimes 3 days' notice. So it's really, really difficult to make accurate or useful predictions about what life will be like throughout the rest of the year. But I thought it might be helpful to give you an idea or an indication of some of the things that are going on now. I think we'll move very quickly on to the plans for Celtic Connections 2021. It's probably it's a really useful live example of how Glasgow is responding to what's happening at the moment, and particularly about how we are intending to host something like a normal festival running from the 15th of January until the 2nd of February. It's going to be online. It's going to be performances every night. I've chosen a picture here which shows you some of the scale of some of the attendances at previous performances. It annually welcomes over 100,000 attendees. And what we're hoping is that the festival's digital first programme will appeal to the wide international audience they traditionally see attending the festival. Celtic Connections is absolutely, as it's described in its title, it's based on the roots of Celtic music, but it talks about it brings performers together who have been influenced by that kind of thing. So it's hopefully a way that people will be able to understand how to continue making those connections, particularly with the festival and the country that they are used to having. It will be the 28th Celtic Connections that's happening. In 1994, that was 66 events centred around one venue, which welcomed 27,000 attendees. I don't want to go in too deeply into the background for Celtic Connections. There is a very useful website which will tell you an awful lot more about what's going on this year. But one of the things that the festival team thought was important was helping to support the industry at a time when it has been extremely difficult to get live performances. They are creating unique digital content from specially commissioned projects and performances filmed across many of Glasgow's much loved venues. In doing so, the festival is aiming to support and encourage the creative industries to help protect Scotland's rich musical legacy, so that when we are talking about 6 months' time or 12 months' time or 18 months' time, that hopefully some of the people who are working in these industries are still able to deliver what they have spent often most of a lifetime learning how to do brilliantly. I'll finish very briefly with a couple of pictures that I hope gives you some optimism and some cause for minor celebration. We have a couple of examples here. On the left is one of the bands that is performing at Celtic Connections 2021, actually filming. The slide on the right is the team in the background. It is the technicians, the festival producer, and who are there on site at the time, again filming those performances, so that we are ready to present a festival that will be unique and online in 2021. And very lastly, one or two of you might know this as St Luke's, just outside the city centre in the east end of Glasgow, where more of the performances are being filmed. So I think hopefully some signs that there are early positives to have, even while we're still living with the very real effects that COVID is having.
Thank you very much, Gordon. It's great to see the encouraging things that are being done. And certainly we want to reemphasize that if there's ways that we can help support these people who are suffering such a great loss from what would have been their only ways of doing income, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to jump quickly to Jamie Mcgeehan. I know he'll have a few words for us, and we'll take it from there. Thanks again, Gordon.
A very good afternoon to all. My name is Jamie Mcgeehan. It's a pleasure to join with my fellow panelists, and kind regards to our audience. I'm a musician, aspiring writer, and of course an avid festival attendee, and I'm going to speak a little bit about the festivals in Edinburgh. With the Edinburgh International Festival, the International Book Festival, the Festival Fringe, the International Storytelling Festival, the Art Festival, and of course the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, the circumstances of this year have of course been extremely significant, both from an economic point of view as well as a cultural point of view. As we know, these festivals contribute hundreds of millions of pounds to the Scottish economy, and of course they are a major part of our culture. We love attending them. They're world class and indeed world influencing events. If I can speak a wee bit about the Edinburgh Fringe Festival for a moment, which was cancelled this year for the first time in 73 years. Before planning was halted because of the pandemic, the Fringe Festival confirmed more than 2,200 shows from 48 countries in around 230 venues, with 30,000 performers' livelihoods affected. The Fringe Festival has helped to launch the careers of so many renowned performers, actors, musicians and comedians. Household names such as Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie, Emma Thompson, and of course much loved Scot Craig Ferguson, who made his Fringe debut as a comedy persona being Hitler in the 1980s. Now a household name, Craig went on to hold The Late Late Show until 2014. Mike Myers, the Canadian comic who devised Wayne's World, Austin Powers, and indeed So I Married an Axe Murderer, if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie, made his Fringe debut in 1985 and went on to be a massive worldwide success. So the Fringe Festival is such a great developer of new talent, and it's essential. What we have seen this year is, of course, great innovation in terms of how we deliver events. The Fringe Festival have been running a series of Fringe and Friday events, as well as their pick and mix events, which allowed hundreds of artists to share their performances directly with the audience at home. There have been great efforts for Fringe fundraising, spearheaded by much loved Scots, including Alan Cumming, who we've seen earlier on. Another example of innovation, and these are times to innovate, the producer of the theatrical version of Fleabag, which has now become very successful, Francesca Moody, delivered a series of comedy and drama streaming live from a shed in Edinburgh for 3 weeks, comically entitled Shedinburgh. So far, fundraising has been going strong for the Fringe Festival for next year, for its production and indeed fundraising direct to artists whose livelihood are so affected by the cancellations of the festival. What we are seeing are great examples of innovation, the use of internet streaming and digital events, and vitally, the international audience rallying to support the development of Scottish culture and events. Although these events have been significantly and profoundly affecting to us all, what we are seeing and experiencing is a real international community effort coming together in support, friendship and kinship. Thanks very much.